All right, let's kick this thing kicked off here. Hey, Andy, how's it going, dude?
Hey, John. Happy Friday, everybody, or Saturday,
Yeah,
depending on what part of the world you're coming from.
yeah. Happy Friday, happy Saturday. I'm feeling pretty good today, man. I'm like I just flew in last night. I arrived about midnight back home. I was in San Francisco for the week. For those that follow me on LinkedIn, I was posting like my bag dump, of like everything as I was kind of packing up for the airport. But yeah, I was out in San Francisco for the week, doing AI summaries for an EY event. So we were, as you do, you record all the sessions for an event that you've got. Well, we were taking those recordings and running them through Copilot in Stream. I've got early access to be able to use that from the product group, and pulling out like key takeaways and summaries and stuff so that we could feed those to our knowledge team. And it was a lot of fun. We were using Stream, to kind of like augment this big event that we put on and see what it could do. So I'm flying high from doing that. And I'm also really excited, Andy. I've got this is the first live stream that we're doing with my new setup. So if you guys are noticing, like I'm a little bit lower, like it's a little bit more conversational, and I'm going to be looking at the camera today. So I wanted to show real quick before we kick off, just to break the ice a little bit, because everybody likes a good desk setup. I got the Elgato prompter. So yeah, I've got a prompter now, so I can see our control panel and everything right in front of my camera, which is like super cool, because now we've got kind of dedicated. If I don't know if I can zoom in on this thing. I've got like, our show notes and stuff right here on my big monitor, and then like the display screen down below. That's, what you guys are seeing right now. But then I've got my camera. I can see the comments. I can see like, switching stuff on and off of screen really easily. So I'm stoked for that. This is basically, a little bit of inside baseball. This is what we see when we're talking to you guys. We see the show and we see the chat along the side. So, I'm able to see that right in the camera view. So we're not going to miss, any of your guys's great comments and questions coming in. So, that's a little bit of just some like inside what we do to actually run the show. And it reminds me to invite you guys to ask questions along the way. So Andy, I was getting really excited about this show yesterday in the airport as I was going through the slides. We tend to wander off, right? Like I've already started this this one from the right beginning, where I kind of wander off on other topics, but we want to keep ourselves on track because we got a lot of ground to cover today. And as I was going through, I was thinking, man, I think this is going to be perfect for people who are, they're into Gen AI and they've used Copilot and they've got their feet under them, but they want to like level up. They want to get to that next level. And it's really like the spirit of 365 Deep Dive is we're going to like go into some breakdown of very intricate and specific prompt engineering tactics, so that hopefully you guys can take away some good nuggets and try some new techniques outside of like kind of the general prompts that we've been showing up until this point, where it's like, give me a summary or help me prepare for tomorrow. We're going to get a little bit more in the weeds of like, all right, I'm going to go in strategically because I want something special, and rather just kind of the general, like, here's the 4 ingredients that make a good prompt. We're hoping that you'll get in the mindset of thinking like, okay, this is the tactic I'm using. I'm using few shot. I'm using meta prompting. And like, as you kind of recognize the techniques you're using, you'll learn that you've got basically like this quiver, of tactics that you can pull that arrow out and you can use that tactic when it's appropriate. And I don't know. I'm just really excited that, that hopefully I'm going to get better at prompting, and, the rest of us will all learn together, to new techniques. I know you've been geeking out about this since like January of last year. You've been reading the manual and really understanding the research around it. I'm a little bit behind, so hopefully I can catch up a little bit with you today. So, but you're
Yeah, I
definitely the
think
expert on this one, Andy.
this one's going to be a fun one. There's going to be a lot of trial and error, because the one thing that you're going to learn pretty quickly about prompting and just prompt engineering in general is that you can enter the same prompt over and over and over, and you're going to get a little bit different result each and every time. And
Mhm.
taking it back to an analogy that we did in our last deep dive, when you're working with prompting and just generative AI, you're dealing with an intern, and it's a really smart intern, but it needs a lot of guidance. Kind of like whenever you ask your 6-year-old to unload the dishwasher, it needs a lot
Mhm.
of guidance and specific instructions. And even if you tell it the exact same way, exactly like copy and paste the exact same prompt over and over, the results going to be a little bit different. Just like if you were talking to John and I, we could talk about this topic today, tomorrow, next Tuesday, and each time the conversation is going to be about the same, but the words and the flow is going to be a little bit different each and every time. So this is going to be
Mhm.
kind of fun, because there's going to be some trial and error. We're going to show you some ins and outs of the prompts and what's going to happen, but we're going to go over techniques. So if you're not familiar with techniques, this is how you can talk to generative AI. And this comes directly from the OpenAI prompt engineering manual, the guide. Yes, I nerded out. I read the book, and I keep going back to it because it's really, really helpful to understand how to get the results that you want out of the tool. We're also going to cross-reference those techniques with our different Copilot experiences. So we're going to go and show you what happens if you do a one shot in Copilot Chat versus if you do it in Copilot Word. We're going to give you some of the real time ins and outs of that. And as we're doing this, we're really excited to try it out live for all of you, because like John said, we've been doing this behind the scenes for a while, but we're interested to see your feedback. What's your go-to prompt? What's your favorite technique? What's a tactic that you like to use when you're engaging generative AI? And that's really how we're going to approach it. So I think we're ready to kind of dive into this one prompt, two prompt,
Yeah.
one shot, few shot.
Yeah, let's do it, man. And I put the in the chat, I put the link to the manual. It's also on screen here. This is like OpenAI's, book
Mm.
or Bible, if you will, of like 6 strategies for getting better results. It's kind of like the almost the genesis of prompt engineering for some people. And they go into 6 in the manual. What Andy and I are going to talk about is, what is it, dude? Like 15
Yeah,
or something like
15.
that. So like this is an evolving and growing field where like techniques are emerging that aren't in the manual that they wrote, mid last year. So this is going to be a really fun one.
Yeah, I agree.
So the structure that we're looking at doing today, right, is I think we're going to break this down into focusing on a technique specifically, talk about like what the technique is, where it's useful, how you would use it in some real world scenarios. And then we want to apply that technique to Copilot specifically. So, what applications do we think this technique would be best used in? It's not all going to be Copilot chat, right? The probably Copilot chat's kind of the easy answer for everything because it's that cross app experience, similar to like a GPT Pro or something like that. Um, but there's some things that like, oh, this would be really good in Word. This would be really good in Outlook, and we want to highlight those. And we're going to think together, both me and Andy and you in the chat. We want you to share prompts that you think would be good for this technique. And we want to throw a few prompts in, kind of play with the technique and see what we can learn from it. So that we almost kind of build together some ideas. And we're going to use the overarching scenario of Jolly Roger Java, the fictional coffee shop that Andy invented for our sandbox environment. So, does that sound like a good structure, Andy?
Oh yeah, I'm looking
Awesome.
forward to diving into the Jolly Roger Java business processes here today.
All right. Awesome. So this is, tips for effective prompting. Andy has this somewhat, similar type of thing as a carousel in his LinkedIn. And that's what we want to step through today is what these techniques are specifically. So Andy, you want to kick us off here?
Yeah, so as we dive into this particular section, the first thing we need to baseline off is what is a prompt? And a prompt is basically a request or a question or an ask of the generative AI system. And in our case, we're going to be mainly working with Copilot here today. So when you go to Copilot, it's going to be what you're asking it to do. For most users, when you start off with this, the very first time, you're going to look at it like you do a search engine, and you're going to ask it something along the lines of what you would put into a search box. Some of you are a little bit more experienced, so you might do some search syntax. You might insert an or, a not, an asterisk. You might put things in quotes. But you're going to quickly find that it's a little bit smarter than a search engine because it's a natural language model. You can talk to it like you would John or I. So you
Mhm.
can ask it a question and you can give it some context. You can ask it a question and you can tell it how you want the output to be returned. You can ask an initial question to kind of baseline what kind of information that you want, and then you can iterate on that through a conversation and you can get the output or the results that you're looking for, or you can get pretty close to it. But when you prompt, you're simply asking the service to return information. But how you prompt matters. The words that you use, the format that you use, the order that you put it all together, those things really matter. In the Copilot world, and we'll bring this up on the screen in just a second, when you prompt, Microsoft has some best practices that you want to apply to prompting. They recommend that you have a goal in mind. What do you want Copilot to do? What kind of information do you want it to return? Then the context. Why do you need it? What's involved? What process? What people? From there, what are your expectations? How should Copilot respond to fulfill the request that you're asking of it? And then the source. What's the source of the information? Do you have any samples or examples or documentation that you want to point out? And I want to just expand on source just a little bit. The primary source that you're going to get out of something like Copilot is the data that it's actually trained on. So it's been trained based off of publicly available information and Microsoft searched information. That's the primary source of Copilot, the data that's been trained on. Typically, there's a cutoff date on that, so that means something that may have come to light in the last couple of months and gone viral might not necessarily be available as part of the data that Copilot was trained on. So that's
Mhm.
the first primary source. The second source that you're going to have when you're working with Copilot is you have the ability to extend into a web search. So in Microsoft's case, they would be using Bing search. They would extend the training module that they are the trained module that they have to include web results, and then they'll run that through the Copilot service and the LLM and return information. But if you're in an enterprise environment, Copilot can extend through the Microsoft Graph to content that you have access to, things like documents stored in OneDrive, SharePoint, Microsoft Teams, information that's associated with Outlook, like in emails and calendaring. But it's
Mhm.
only things that you have permission and access to that it's going to bring back as part of that conversation. So defining the source as part of your prompt can be really important because if you're in an enterprise environment and you search for onboarding handbook, there might be 100 of those across all the different business units in your organization. You would want to be specific and narrow it down to a certain kind. So this is what we're talking about here. What John's got up on the screen
Yeah.
is you have your goal, you have your context, you have your expectations, and your source. What we want to teach you how to do today is how to put this together in kind of a meaningful way, a prompt, so that you can get back from Copilot the information that you're expecting, or information along the lines of like what you're looking for to get started and to get over that blank page.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. As you were explaining that, I was feverishly finding the link for it. I got that in the chat as well. But yeah, those are the four kind of ingredients, and that's what makes up the thing that's called a prompt, right? You're writing prompts or you're sending requests. I think I explained this in the last one that we did, where I was talking about the idea that, like, don't think of it as like a technical like command prompt. Think of it as a creative writing prompt academically, right? And it's not supposed to be a technical thing because we're using natural language. It is, I'm going to inspire you, AI, to come back with a response. And I need to write a good prompt, like a teacher would write a good prompt as well. So these prompting techniques, that's called prompt engineering. And it takes time. It's a muscle that you have to exercise, because as Andy said, like, we're used to speaking like semantic search language and talking to Google for the last 20 years or Bing for the last however many years, but like, we're not used to talking to it like you would talk to your kids and get them to do something for you. It's a lot different way of working. So with that in mind, those four ingredients, we get into some more advanced techniques. And the first one that we want to look at is the idea of like shot prompting. And there's zero shot, there's one shot, and there's few shot. To focus in first on what we call zero shot, this is basically you're starting with a blank slate, and you want to just throw something at Copilot or throw something at the large language model and get a direct answer back, right? And you can see the example here is like, give me a checklist for opening procedures for a coffee shop. I don't need a specific structure necessarily. I don't have examples in my mind that I want you to follow a model. I just need something, right? Get me this. So that's the idea of zero shot prompting. And Andy, we've got the idea or the example up on the screen. Do we want to go ahead and run that in Copilot? So you could do this, in a couple different places. The first one, obviously, is you could do this in like Copilot chat. You could do, some brainstorming type of sessions, but you can also do it in Word as well. And I like the idea of Copilot in Word for this because I can say, and I get the place that I could save back a document. So this is something that I learned in a Copilot class that was taught by Microsoft for EY. Did you know that you can do I think it's doc or word.new, I think is what it's called. Yeah, you can do word.new and like excel.new, and it takes you to a new document.
Oh, wow.
Did you know that?
I know that.
Apparently, no. Microsoft owns like .new, and you could do word.new and it'll make you a new Word document. Isn't that crazy? So because I did word.new, I've got Word open, and we've got the magical Copilot up in the upper corner. And we can do a zero shot prompt here. So give me a checklist of opening procedures for a coffee shop, right? We're not really getting super specific. This is what my coffee shop's about. Like, I just need like, how do you start up a coffee shop, right? So it's going to create that for me over here on the side. And I'm really in the kind of answer and response area where it's, giving me some ideas, and I can kind of take that, I could copy and send it over, or I could start with a draft over there. I actually lost the button. There it is. Whenever you open up a brand new document, you've got the area that you can draft in. So rather than like kind of ideating on the side, I could say like, okay, actually just give it to me in the document itself. Did I mess that up? I think I lost the text. I think it's weird because I'm in dark mode. There we go. Grief. Okay, so we're going to have it generate a document, and then that way I can go ahead and I can rename that and put it into a place. And it's like, you're not having to go back to your chat history. You've got an actual document that now you can share with somebody else. And then, Alex Wilbur from Contoso can also collaboratively edit this with you. So we can go ahead and keep that. There's our checklist for like opening day, and we can save that over in a special spot if we want to. Like if we had, a Microsoft team for Jolly Roger Java, operation manual, that might be where that would get saved. Another thing that comes to mind, Andy, is doing this in Microsoft Loop, right?
Mm-hmm.
Doing like a zero shot, like maybe you're creating like the employee manual, right? And you're just starting out. You're not really like branding everything around Jolly Roger Java theme yet, but you're creating like your employee manual. Loop workspace might be like a perfect place for that. And you could create and do those zero shot techniques within Microsoft Loop as well, right?
Yeah, I can come on the screen for that one.
Okay.
So I'm already in a Loop workspace that's built around prompting. We'll just go in, and what I want to do is draft some page content here inside of Microsoft Loop. And I can do basically the same example that John has. Create an opening checklist. And so we'll run the same thing over here. I'm curious to see how the results that we're going to get here are going to match up with the zero shot that you just drafted. I've noticed over the last few months that the results are starting to be a little bit more consistent as I go across different Copilot experiences. For anybody who joined in with us in the past couple of 365 deep dives, we talked a little bit about like the Copilot notebook, and I showed a couple of examples of going from public Copilot to Copilot with enterprise protected data to Copilot for Microsoft 365 and Copilot Notebook. And there were the results were very, very consistent going across all three of those. So here I've got the opening checklist drafted inside of Loop. You saw how quick that was for that to actually pull up. But I'd be curious, we can go back and compare in just a moment around the results that you got whenever you ran this inside of Word. But the main thing to take away from this is this technique is a zero shot. We haven't provided much context other than we gave it an ask. We want an opening checklist, and it's for a coffee shop. The opening checklist is the ask. The coffee shop is the context that it's using for that output. And then it went ahead and gave us a bulleted list of items. I've got about 10 or 12 items on my list. So that's the zero shot technique for prompting. And we've seen it now in a couple of different apps. Now, we kept it pretty basic with the prompt that we gave it. We didn't provide any further goals, context, or other best practices in there. So there we have kind of a zero shot.
Yeah. So the next like kind of level up after zero shot is one shot prompting. So to move on to that, this is useful if you need like a specific style or format that you wanted to respond with. So in the example right here is like, say that you're kind of drafting a standard format for responding to like complaints, right? For your coffee shop. So you would say like, here's how I want you to respond. And you give it one example of, I'm sorry that you're having this issue. I want to offer you, a coupon for a free coffee next time, something like that, right? Like I want you to start out with like empathizing with the customer, acknowledging, the issue, and that it'll be corrected, and then offering, some kind of like retribution, right, for it. And you basically have like a template of a complaint response. You give that to the large language model and then say, all right, now I need you to do it for the next 50 in this list. And hopefully if you're a brand new coffee shop, you don't have 50 customer complaints like the first week that you need to go through. Otherwise you're probably in trouble. But that's kind of the examples. Like, I'm going to give you the template and I'm going to give it to you one time. And then I expect you to follow this format, where the difference is when we get to the next one of like few shot is like you're giving it more room for creativity because you're giving it in several examples. This is, I want you to be kind of rigid in your following a structure. Is
Yeah.
that accurate, Andy? Is that kind of the way that you see it?
Yeah, yeah. You're giving it an example to set the context of what you're looking for. And then
Mhm.
you're asking it to give something similar, complementary, or something uh, contrasting to that particular example. I'll come up on the screen and I'll show an
Yeah.
example of how we can actually put this into practice. So we just did the zero shot, create an opening checklist for a coffee shop.
Mhm.
Now I'm going to go in and we're going to do the one shot technique. So I'm going to go and let's see, where's Copilot? Tell you what, we'll just go to a new page.
This is a good point. While you're
There we go.
while you're bringing that up, from Will, says zero shot in his mind is like basically like the first level, right? You're kind of prompting as if it's Google, like, do this thing for me, and as you kind of mature, I think that's a really good way to do it, is like, this is my quick off the cuff. And when I start getting into like one shot, that's where I'm starting to learn that, like, hey, I can teach it something during this session, right? So
Right. I would agree with that exactly. All right. So let's go in and draft page content. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste in what we had before. So like I've entered in the here's the opening checklist for the coffee shop and all of the examples. So
mhm.
are all of the listed items from before. So now I'm going to say um, create a closing checklist for a coffee shop, and then I'm going to tell it to create based off of that. Hold
Mhm.
on.
So what I would imagine it's probably going to do is it's going to take that opening checklist as an example, and it's going to give you basically the inverse of that. So if you have done these things to open the coffee shop, you would basically undo these things to close the coffee shop. So I imagine it's going to have like almost an opposite of each one of those. That'd be my prediction.
All right, so here's the closing list, and I'll go in and I'll paste back in the opening list. So turn
Okay.
off all the lights and the equipment and any appliances that are not needed overnight.
Which is
Clean
the
the
opposite
coffee
of turning
makers
on
and
all the
espresso
lights.
machines.
Yeah.
Remove any leftover pastries. Restock. Check and refill the milk. Dispose of any leftover coffee or beverages. Check the cash register. Count it. Wipe down the tables. Ensure all employees have clocked out and are ready to leave. Lock the doors, turn off the open sign. So it did kind of mirror and contrast what it did on the open. I think it called out a couple of different things. But in this example, we took the opening one and we gave it as context and said, now create the closing checklist for the coffee shop. So that's what a one shot's going to do for you. You're giving it a little bit of a sample, a little bit of data, and you're grounding the language model. You're grounding Copilot with context. And then
Mhm.
if you hear the term grounding, that's what you mean, or that's what it's meant. You are giving context to what you're asking the system to do. You're saying, here's something I need an output that's going to be along the same lines. That
Mhm.
context could be the format and the style that you want to return it in. It could be the business process that you're working with. It could be the tone. It could be the audience. That's what you're kind of grounding that information in. And in our case, it's a checklist. Now we've got an open and a close, and we were
Mhm.
able to get the close based off of using the open. And now that's a one shot prompt.
Yeah. And you can see like the difference here in what Andy did and what I did. He did a few shot, right? So he basically has like everything in the opening checklist has been accounted for in the closing checklist, right? Those were the same length. I did a 0 shot right here where I said, just give me a closing checklist. And I didn't tell it what the opening checklist was. So you can see that it's pretty short right here. Like it doesn't have the restocking of the milk and getting rid of like discarding the old milk, stuff like that. That by starting with the opening checklist, Andy has a closing checklist now that actually would be more operationally efficient for the coffee shop because it sets the next day up for success because it has addressed what needs to be opened for the next day, right? So that's like where you can start to hopefully understand that like you're getting a better result using a one-shot method if that's what you desire is like, well, I'm opening, I'm closing, I'm going to open the next day. Why don't I give it that context so that I get a better result that actually prepares me better for my next day? And that's really getting to the point of like where these things in a business context kind of help you with business solutions, right? So that's a good example of like the one shot versus the few shot and how the one shot gave us a better example for what we were looking for exactly. Anything else on one shot or you want to move on?
We've got one more, like we'll kind of review this after we go through the next one, which is the few shot technique. I'm going to go back and show a couple of things that apply
Yeah.
to 0, 1, and few shot and kind of put it all together. So in the next one we have is the few shot prompting. This is where
Mhm.
you provide a few examples and you're grounding it so that you can provide the scope of what you're actually looking for. This helps to really narrow down Copilot's all-encompassing knowledge to what you're specifically like looking for. This is really effective for things like clarifying the output, clarifying the format, clarifying the nuances of what you're asking. So the example that we have here is consider these responses to customer service issues. So we're a brand new coffee shop. We're trying to figure out like all the ins and outs. We got a bunch of complaints in week number 1. So here's all the complaints that we've got in week number 1. Now help us to create a response for maybe issues with the loyalty program, maybe issues with the throughput, getting drinks out on the other side, maybe issues with clarifying what's on our menu. By giving it a few different examples, Copilot and the large
Mhm.
language models in general are very, very good at kind of extracting the concept, the objectives, the outcomes. Even if they're not explicitly included in the prompt, they're very good at extracting and identifying that information and being able to not only give you relevant information, but maybe also point out some gaps that you might not have noticed along the way. So few shot,
Mhm.
we're giving a few different examples. And those examples could be complementary to one another. They could also be opposing to one another. And Copilot's going to kind of fill in some of the gaps and give you an output around that.
Yeah,
So
and one thing that I do want to point out that might be in the back of some people's mind who are like rolling out Copilot is wait a second. I thought Microsoft said that the large language model in Copilot doesn't learn from my enterprise data or doesn't learn from my prompts and responses. I do want to clarify that what we're talking about is we're within a session. So you can do a temporary quote unquote learning session where you are teaching the large language model what you want right now. But if you were to start a new topic, like new chat, it's not going to have that history, right? From like where you were. So you're not whenever we say that you're teaching the model to do something in the same theme as what you want, you're not you're not teaching it long term, you're teaching it in the session that you're having right now. So some people who are kind of a little bit worried about like is this going to be like stuck in the LLM and whatever secret thing I was talking about stays there. That's not what's happening here. We're basically like we're kind of leading it down a path. If we end this session, the large language model doesn't like remember what we were doing. So I did want to point that out because I could imagine some alarm bells going
yeah,
off
yeah, that's
for
a good
some
call out.
people.
All right, let's dive into this example, and I'll
Perfect.
come on screen for this one and show. What I'm going to do is take what we've already done. We've got two examples there. We got an opening and a closing checklist. But what about running things throughout the day? So let's go in, we'll do just here, new page. We're going to go and draft page content. I'm going to paste that information in. So that's the previous information is in, and create a midday checklist for coffee shop operations. So now we've got two samples of information, got a similar format between the two. They contrast a little bit because they're opening and closing. So what's it going to come up with for midday interaction, midday processes? So midday checklist. Make sure you check and restock supplies, replenish the condiments, empty and clean out any coffee pots, wipe down your tables, check the pastries, monitor the cash register, make sure you got enough change. Check the status of the equipment and the appliances, address any maintenance issues, review the daily specials, ensure that all employees are present, performing their duties, and then monitor your customer service satisfaction along the way. And so you can kind of compare and contrast that with the previous two examples. That it is referencing some of the stuff that it did before, but it's also filling in some of the gaps, and even in some cases providing a little bit of insight beyond that. So like we saw for the opening, ensure everybody's present and in proper uniform. At the end of the day, making sure everybody's checked out and ready to leave. Well, midday, make sure that they're present performing duties. And we could even expand off of that. Create a list of 5 things that you think that teammates in our coffee shop should be doing throughout the day to provide good customer service satisfaction. And you would be building on the few shot that you already had. So that's an example of how we can take something that we've already done and then build on that, using that as kind of a reference for the next part of the process. Now that's kind of foreshadowing for something we're going to talk about in a little while called iterative prompting. But in this case, specifically for few shot, we've given it a couple of examples of what we're looking for, help us to create the next output based off of that.
Will has a really good question here. That's how do we handle situations where you know ahead of time that generally like there's only one correct response, like you know what the right answer is and you want it to stick to that. He did provide an example. He's like, so like, what if I wanted something from the prompt that like I articulated really specific requirements and I want to get it like, you know, back in a specific manner. I think my answer, if I understand it correctly, Will, would be I think you would be wanting to stick to a one-shot method for that. So it's like you're giving it the exact structure you want. You're giving it the answer and then saying, you know, follow this for a different like detail. Um, you know, I think few shot gives you a little bit more creativity back and it gives it more room to kind of like figure out, you know, what it wants to do. But if I understand correctly, I think probably I would give it like the answer as a theoretical example and have it follow that for me. Um, I don't know.
Yeah, no, you're
What do you
spot
think,
on with
Andy?
that, John. And shout out to Will. He's from my neck of the woods. For what Will's asking, a one shot would actually be very good there. You want to give it an example of what the output you want it to
Mhm.
have looks like, and then you provide the parameters of that output, and then you would provide the ask. So by providing the sample and then the parameters, and then giving it the ask within that particular
Mhm.
prompt, you're more likely to get the output that you're looking for, or something along those lines.
Yeah, I think what you could do, like even going out to, oh my gosh, I just blanked out on what's the what's the developer tool for like finding code and asking questions. Um,
Well, there's
Crap,
W3
what's it?
schools.
Yeah, W3 schools. I was thinking, gosh, I forgot. It's like a forum, right? That has
Stack
like coding
Overflow.
questions. Yeah, Stack Overflow. I don't know why I forgot that. But like if it's like, okay, I need to write a PowerShell script that's like a for each to, you know, do I don't know, like assigning a meeting policy to people, or something like that, and you don't have that exact code, but you know you could like go find something in Stack Overflow that's like how to create a for each in PowerShell based off a CSV file or something like that, then you could say, I want you to use this structure. Here's like something that works. I want you to apply it to this commandlet in PowerShell. I think that would be an example of one shot in coding where like you would get a scripted answer based off of like a coding technique, like a for each or something like that. So yeah, that's a really good question though. And I think it does drive into the fact of like, all right, you've got 3 arrows in your quiver, the 0 shot, the fuse shot, and the 1 shot. What are you going to use when, right? Like I want it to be more creative, or I want it to do it the same every single time, like I don't know. Like I almost view a 1 shot as like in the example of writing a customer complaint response, I almost view it as like a mail merge, a fancy way of doing a mail merge. It's going to be the same way every time, but it might word the empathy section a little bit differently or something like that. But it's generally going to do the 3 things I want it to do. Where if I gave it like a few shot that had more variety, it might offer them, something crazy. I don't know. It just depends on if variety is okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So to kind of put this in context, and I'm bringing my prompt library up on the screen inside of Loop to kind of share some insight here. Just defining the first 3 that we covered: the 0 shot, the 1 shot, and the few shot, along with the description and the use case. And then there's a couple of like generic examples that you'd work with. But you're going to find that these techniques vary as you move across the different Copilot experiences. So if you try this in Copilot Chat, Word, Outlook, you're going to get a pretty good result out of that. But if you try to take like a 0 shot into Excel's probably going to say, "I'm sorry, I'm still learning," and it might not give you what you're looking for. If you take this into PowerPoint, the results, they're going to be kind of mixed, because Excel's for working with table-based data, PowerPoint's for working with like presentations. So your results are going to vary just a little bit. We just saw though, as part of the demo here, that this actually works very well for Copilot in Loop, beyond just kind of the ones that we have there. I've got a couple other columns here where we are going to insert maybe some more prompts as we're kind of like moving through this, but I just wanted to kind of point the use case across the various Copilots out as we're discussing this. Moving into the 1-shot prompting, this one is good when you need a specific style or format, like Will's question. This one works very well for Copilot Chat, works very well in Word, works really good in Outlook whenever you're trying to craft a response with a certain tone, certain voice associated with it. With 1-shot prompting, I also want to point out, and going back to Will's coding question, GitHub Copilot's really good for that. So if you don't have a license for that, I would check that out. And then Few Shot. This one's good when you need to give a couple of different examples to maybe clarify the requirements and kind of load the system, so to speak, ground the system, and get it down to the context and the scope that you want. I find this works great in Copilot Chat, but it'll kind of vary as you go across some of the different applications. Now, with that, I do want to show you one more series of examples around 0 shot, 1 shot, and few shot, and it's just another way to think about it. So with that, I'm going to head into, we'll do this in Copilot. All right, so I'm in Copilot for the web. This one's business protected data, so it does have web search enabled with it. And I'm going to do a 0 shot, and then I'm going to build off of that. So we're talking about a coffee shop franchise. So I'm going to say A is for Americano. Pretty basic. It's like we're doing a kids game. A is for Americano. And I'm going to let Copilot do what it does. And it's like, yep, that's correct. Americano, it's a type of drink made by diluting espresso in hot water. Now, I didn't give it any other context beyond that. I just said A is for Americano. So I'm going to take that, and then I'm going to go back Let's paste that in, and then I'm going to say B is for, and I'm just going to leave that. I'm going to leave it open-ended. A is for Americano, B is for, and then I'm going to put that in. This is more of kind of, we're kind of in the 0-shot range. I'm leaving it open-ended. Like I get, or well, actually, we're kind of in the 1-shot. I told it A is for Americano, B is for, but I'm leaving it kind of open-ended so it can interpret that. And look what it's doing. If we're following the pattern of coffee drinks, starting with the letters of the alphabet, A is for Americano, B could be for Breve, and then it kind of gives us an example off of that. I didn't tell it specifically that I wanted to go down the route of the ABCs of coffee drinks. Now, in my mind, that's where this example is actually going. I'm going down the ABC of coffee drinks, but I didn't tell it that. I just said B is for, and I left it open ended. It interpreted that. So, this is a situation where you might need to provide a little bit of grounding, a little bit of context to get it to go in the direction that you want. Otherwise, it is very fairly intelligent, and it can kind of interpret the direction that you want to go based off of maybe the context of the conversation. So in this particular case, because this is like literally a conversation, like we started with A is for Americano, B is for, it was able to look at the previous back and forth and figure out, oh, this is what we're actually talking about. So let's take that and go to a new topic. We're going to clear out this conversation and we're going to go to a new topic. All right, so I'm just going to paste this in. And Americano is for A, B is for, and I'll just update this. And I'm going to leave it there, kind of a 1-shot. And we're going to see if it's able to figure out the direction that we want to go with this. So coffee themed alphabet, A is for Americano, B is for Breve. It's a half and half milk option. So it didn't continue anymore from there, but it's picking up what we're looking for. And it even suggests, hey, maybe you want to do C for cappuccino and D for a doppio, and just kind of continuing down that route. So this is where it can be fun. You can say, please continue with the ABCs of coffee drinks, because now we've given an initial, 1-shot. We've set the context. It has an idea of what we're doing. So now I can just follow up simply with natural language and just say, continue this. And then it should go ahead and do so. So here's the continuation. And not only is it giving me C is for, it's also giving me a brief description, and it went ahead and it took the liberty of putting it into a list for me, which is really helpful. So this one's kind of showing, a few different elements of the power of the prompting techniques, and just kind of giving you some insight into how it thinks kind of on the back end as it's working through this. Now, this particular one, we've got A, we've got B, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of just copy a little bit of this, and we'll do the next part. So that's kind of a 1-shot, and then continuing off of that, let's go and do a few shot. So we're going to do, oops, and I just need to go, hold on one second. I'm going to go over here, do my handy little clipboard, copy, paste that in. And I'm going to remove, I don't even want the definition there. And I'm just kind of cleaning this up a little bit so it looks readable for me. And then I'm going to put that in. And we're going to see now, this is a few shot example. We've given it 3 or 4 examples. And now it's telling me, hey, I see you're creating an alphabet themed coffee list. I can continue the list if you like. And I'm going to say, yes, please continue the list. Contextually, it knows what I want to do now. It's going ahead and giving me that as a predefined option along the bottom. So I discovered this early on working with ChatGPT, and then I've been able to use it through my adventures with Copilot as well. Full backstory on this: I sing songs to my kids every night when I put them to bed, and we do the ABCs. But I don't like to just do ABC. I like to do, A is for airplane, B is for bus, C is for car. And one of the ways that I've kind of kept myself interested is to kind of challenge myself, and I'll pick a theme and I try to do an ABC theme throughout. Coffee shop is one of them.
For the
Uh,
whole
the
alphabet.
ABCs of fruits and vegetables, the ABCs of just fruits, the ABCs of just vegetables, the ABCs of Marvel comic characters, cartoon characters. That's a really fun game for me.
Yeah.
And it taught me, or like in trying to like figure out some of these, I turned to AI and it's like, hey, help me figure out like what's a fruit that begins with the letter X, and give me three different fruits that begin with the letter X, and so you kind of learn to like fill in the gaps there. But there we have it. That's a few shot technique, and we by giving it 4 examples, it was able to extrapolate this is the thing that you're doing, and it even gave us the prompt. It's still like down at the bottom. It went ahead and gave us that prompt, so we didn't have to do a whole lot of work with that. The last thing I might do here is I would say like rewrite this in a list format, so it's nice and neat and easy to read. And because it's got all of that information, it should be able to do that pretty quickly. And there it goes.
Nice. Before we move on to the next category of prompts, I wanted to show also a real world example, or like a business example in that like complaint thing, if we can.
Yeah, go for it.
So I'm going to steal the screen here real quick. And I was thinking like, let's go along with that theme of like, consider these responses to customer service issues, right? So like we're a new coffee shop. We've got complaints coming in, right? And so I'm going to zoom this in just a little bit here. I've got these, 10 complaints have come in, and basically I said, hey, Copilot, like give me a list of like 10 complaints and 10 names, I made a table out of it. So we've got these 10 things coming in, and I'm going to show you how you can use different techniques within the same process, right? So what I did in Word was I said, all right, Word Copilot, I want you to write me a response to customer complaints in a coffee shop where you empathize with the situation, you acknowledge the problem, and you offer a free coffee for next time as like the apology, right? So those 3 elements, give me it. That's a 0 shot, right? I didn't give it any examples. I just said, I need a generic, I'm sorry message. Then I switched to 1 shot. So I started with 0 shot, give me an example. Now what I've done is I copied that and I said, I need help writing responses to customer complaints. I want you to write a response to each of these 10 complaints in this list of complaints. So because we got Copilot for Microsoft 365, I used the / command. I'm doing a reference in Copilot, which is something that you can do in Copilot chat. And then I'm giving it its 1 shot. Here's the generic thing I want you to do. Go. So I started with 0 shot to draft the inspiration. I'm using 1 shot to actually do the task. And here's exactly what it did. So Copilot went through, it looked at the spreadsheet, and it grabbed each complaint in the list and said, okay, this one of the coffee's too cold. So I'm not going to copy word for word. I'm going to, it's going to like be a little bit more nuanced. I'm sorry it wasn't served at the right temperature. We're sorry that the taste did not meet your expectations. Like it's a little bit different. It's not a mail merge where it's actually like the same generic thing. It's acknowledging the problem because it knows the problem based off of, where it got its information. That's one of those ingredients, right? In the ingredients to build a good prompt with Copilot. One of the ingredients is the source. The source is my list of complaints. I know what the complaint is. So Copilot, I want you to acknowledge the complaint, right? So it's doing the same structure based off of what I gave it, which is empathy, acknowledgement, offering a free coffee. And you can see in here, it does it at the same time. Complimentary hot coffee. As a token of our commitment, we're offering you a free coffee. It words it a little bit differently, but it's got the same thing every time. And you can see here, I went through every single of those 10 things. The only thing it didn't do right, Andy, is it says dear customer name. And like I've got the name in the spreadsheet. So I wish it would have said like dear Emma, dear Lionel, or whatever. So it got me like 90% there. But like, dude, that's pretty good compared to like a mail merge, where it's like, just, we're sorry about your issue. Like, it acknowledges what the issue was. And that's that boost that we're talking about, like the drudgery of work of like, answering these every single time, but like also, providing better customer service. This is why, generate AI is worth the sticker price, because you could do it as a mail merge, but it wouldn't be taken as good as like being customized for the person. So, but that's a real world example of, 0 shot to 1 shot prompting.
That's a great example, and it shows the flexibility that you can get out of something like Copilot. And for the part about getting the names right in there, that's an easy fix. There's a couple of different ways we could easily get that in there. And
we probably could have told it in the prompt to like make sure that you put the person's name in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that detail, like I talked about last month with my son. Like, I tell him to unload the dishwasher, he puts the dishes on the floor. The dishwasher's empty, but like I would have to tell him, put this here, put this there. That's where we were talking about last month. We're like, you got to be really literal with this thing, because I just assumed that it would put the person's name in there. Well, no, it didn't. It didn't know that. So I would have to tell it to put the person's name in.
Yep.
I bet if I redid it and said, put the person's name in, it probably would do it perfectly. But yeah, I don't want to take too much more time because we've got a lot of these to go through.
Yeah, we got quite a few more to go through.
Yeah.
So
all right,
why don't
let's
we
move
move
on
into
then.
the next one?
Yeah.
And this is chain of thought prompting. Now, I'll be the first to admit this chain of thought prompting can go 2 completely separate ways. One, exactly what you see here. Explain step by step how you would do X, Y, and Z. So these are prompts that are designed to guide Copilot through a logical process or a series of steps.
Yeah.
The other avenue that you could take this is what we were just doing through conversation. So going back to like the example of A is for Americano, B is for Breve, and then kind of moving through there. Every time you follow up with the conversation, that's kind of a chain of thought, a conversational approach to it, and then getting an outcome. So this can definitely go in both directions. The other thing to point out is I posted this as a carousel on LinkedIn over a week ago. Got a good number of impressions off of it, and some engagement and some feedback. And one of the feedback pieces that we got was actually from a principal product manager at Microsoft for Copilot. And he said that all the techniques that were listed were really, really good, but he specifically called out chain of thought prompting and mentioned that this one isn't necessary in Copilot because it's built into the system. So you might ask Copilot to give me a set of instructions to do X. You don't have to explicitly say, explain step by step how to do X. That's already implied as part of that. But I find that it's sometimes helpful to ask Copilot to think about it step by step, to explain it step by step, because that kind of increases the quality of the response that it gives. So in this one, we're looking for a step-by-step process to solve a complex task. Do you want to drive the demo on this one, or should I?
I've got an example. So like, I'm trying to do these examples on the side so we can move quickly. So I've got an example. This is not a coffee shop thing. I apologize. It's from like my own world of knowledge. So, okay, this is the idea of like new people in IT or new people in the technology field. There's the idea of like giving a man a fish or teaching a man to fish, right? So like for me, giving the engineer a fish, the new engineer, is write up a PowerShell script that goes through a list of users in a CSV file, give them a new policy that disables recording. I just need the code, right? So I ask for that, boom, it gives me that. Here's your script. The example of like chain of thought would be, I'm a new engineer and I could just get this, but I'm not going to learn anything from it necessarily, but I want to be a better engineer. So instead I say, explain step by step how you would write a PowerShell script to blah, blah, blah. I just literally pasted that in, but instead I said, explain step by step. Now, this gives me a little bit more as a technologist who's brand new, straight out of school, to say, how would you get this task done? Not how would you paste in the code and just run it. It would be, well, you need to get your CSV file right. You need to connect to Teams first, because every PowerShell script that uses Microsoft Teams needs to start with connecting to the platform, right? You would need to import CSV. This is something that you're going to do all the time in PowerShell. Let me, explain it as a separate step, because it's going to be a step in every script you're ever going to write in your career, right? So it's breaking down what the code is doing. And then, yeah, it still gives me the script, but I've learned something from it. I've gotten better. And that's one of the three things that Copilot says that, they're kind of marketing hype for Microsoft Copilot is, unleashing creativity, unlocking productivity, and upskilling, right? This is the upskilling side of using Copilot, is like, I could just totally unlock productivity and just get the thing done and just fire out the next one. Or I could take my time and I could ask Copilot to explain step by step. And then I've upskilled. I've gotten better at my career. And that's kind of I'm getting really philosophical about this because like it matters to me. Like that's don't just think about this as like replacing you and like, can I just like get this crap done so that I can just do nothing? Like think about this as like a force multiplier to learn something new as well. So that's my soapbox. Do you have a more poignant example for a coffee shop, Andy?
We're gonna go to the coffee shop,
Cool,
and
dude.
so with my example for the coffee shop, I'm gonna do this in Word, and what I wanted to do is, what's a recipe for an iced mocha latte, and then explain step by step how to make the latte. So we're telling it, the recipe that we want, that's the context, but then we want step-by-step instructions on how to create it. So if you're a mom and pop organization, you're just getting off the ground, you're a small business, and you're putting together a recipe book, you don't
Mhm.
necessarily have to start from scratch. You might have these recipes out there, but you can see how quickly it could build out an entire recipe book, including directions, nutrition information, preparation time, and then any notes. I didn't ask it for all of that additional information. It went ahead and just assumed that I would want it based off of the information that it was trained off of. So that would be an example of chain of thought for, in this case, building an iced mocha latte.
Mhm.
Now, let's do another example of that. And for this one, I'm going to head to Copilot, and I'll do this in Copilot in the web to show you, or Copilot protected data. I'll show you what it looks like there, just because we're kind of bouncing back and forth between the different experiences, and we kind of want you to see that. So like I've got the prompt already there. Let's just enter it in and compare it so we can see like what it looks like compared to like what we got in the Word document just a moment ago. One of the main things to point out is that Word document lives in my OneDrive. That was part of the enterprise version of Copilot for Microsoft 365. Now
Mhm.
here, getting some similar results, instructions: prepare the coffee, the chocolate syrup. If you have store-bought syrup, now we make our own. Jolly Roger Java.
We're gonna need a prompt for that recipe.
Now notice it didn't give me anything like the notes. It didn't give me any nutrition information, any like special instructions. It just gave me this, but it is telling me, here's some places where I got some of this information. Now I'm
Mhm.
going to do another version of this. I'm going to go into the work tab for this. So this is Copilot for Microsoft 365. It's grounded in graph data, so it'll look
Yep.
in the organization for information. It'll also look um, for the training data, and if I want to, I could open this up for web content as well. Now, for this one, I'm going to show the chain of thought that I mentioned in the overview, kind of the other version of this. I'm going to say, what are 5 popular sorry, espresso drinks for a coffee shop? So that's the first thought. What are 5
Mhm.
popular espresso drinks? Give me a list. Now, because I'm connected to Copilot for M365, it might look to see if I have anything internal, any documents that I've drafted previously that I've had in like a document in OneDrive, SharePoint, or Teams. It'll look across the organization for things that I might have access to, and then it'll do the web search and it's going to pull back the results. Now, notice here, it's got from the web up top, and then down below, it says from your company. It seems that you recently worked on a document entitled Prompt Techniques and Examples, which might include content related to coffee shops or customer service. So, internally, from my organization, it does call out that I do have some information around that. All
Mhm.
right. So chain of thought. The next thing that I want to do is I'm going to say, well, I've got these 5 drinks. Create a recipe uh, guide for these 5 drinks. And so I'm moving through a conversation with it. I'm starting small, and then I'm kind of building toward like the thing that I want on the for my output. So this is a helpful technique as you kind of step through something step by step. So you can
Mhm.
ask it for things step by step, but through the conversation of responses, you can go step by step through a process and get the desired output that you want. So now we've created a recipe guide. So we've got kind of the recipe guide. Now I'll say like create an ingredient list for these 5 bevs, and I'll just abbreviate beverages as bevs, and it should be able to identify what we're doing here.
Yeah.
All right, so now we've got the um, the basic ingredient list. We've got the basic recipe guide. Then we could go back and say, create a table for the drinks, include the ingredients and the recipe along with any notes. And because I've stepped through that
Mhm.
step by step throughout, it should have all of the information that I need. And now it can start putting it together in the format that I want on the other end. So to me, that's conversational chain of thought prompting. And that's one of the techniques that I get the best results out of because I
Yeah.
start with kind of what I'm looking for. I kind of ground it. I iterate kind of through that, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And then at the end, I tell it, okay, put this together in the format that I want. And then I'm usually able to get something like this.
Yeah, we're gonna start kind of blurring the lines a little bit here in this middle section of like, between like this and iterative and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I think the point to call out for Andy's demo here is that he's walking on a path with the AI. They've developed this thing, and then now he's bringing it together, right? So he's gotten what he wants because he has taken the time to go through it with the model. Um, and that's it takes more time, to do something like that, but like you get a better deliverable in the end than hoping you got something right and then just kind of like trying the same thing over and over again until you get what you want. He's kind of guided it to what he wants. And that's really, in my mind, that's kind of one of the essences of like chain of thought prompting, is that like we're going back and forth almost like we were having a brainstorming session across a table, right?
Yep. And that's where like the virtual assistant part of it really comes
Mm-hmm.
into play. It's an amazing research assistant. It does a really good job at identifying the context and the objective of what you're looking for. It does really good
Mm-hmm.
opposition research, so it can help you to like kind of plug in holes, and going back and forth in a conversation with it, you can really guide it to give you kind of the output that you want. It does take a little bit more time, but I would argue that you save significantly more time doing it this way versus if you were to try to like do all this research and putting in and comparing things yourself. You're letting it
Mm-hmm.
really shine with what it's good at, and you're guiding it to the outcome that you want. Then you're 80% of the way there with the document that you need to create, and then to be able to build something from there.
Yeah. Andy's blowing my mind right now. He's so further advanced than I am with these types of techniques, where it's like I just kind of keep throwing like the same thing at a wall. Yeah. So on to the next style, the prompt stacking. And I think I have a lot of confusion in my mind, Andy, about like prompt stacking versus chain of thought versus what we'll get into pretty soon about like iterative refinement and stuff like that, like how those are different. But prompt stacking is essentially, it's like it says on the screen, layering multiple prompts in a sequence to build upon like what it actually responded with.
Mhm.
So you're in the context of the response, right? That 1 of 30, 2 of 30, 3 of 30. Those are called turns when it
Mhm.
comes to generative AI. So you're using its response in the previous turn to like add another prompt onto and be like, well, let's talk about that. Let's dive into this thing that you responded with. And you're kind of getting it in my mind. Does it explain it well to say like you're trying to get the AI to kind of like double click on things or kind of like drill into something, a direction that it went, right? That's the way
Yeah.
I kind
So
of see it. Is
yeah.
like in an interview, right? If you're like doing an interview, like, tell me, the last time you were successful in such and such. And as they're telling you something, you're getting your next question in your mind to be like, well, that's really interesting. Can you tell me more about the second thing you mentioned?
Right.
I feel like that's kind of prompt stacking, right?
That's a version of it. The
Okay.
conversational approach that we just went over is also a version of it, but it's
Hmm.
also mixing in a couple of different techniques into a single prompt, or a couple of different techniques like one after the other. So to the interview question, tell me, one thing that you did in your last job that was really successful, and then based off of that, you're formulating like the next area you want to go. That's a good way to think about it. Another way to think about it is going back to like the drink recipe situation. We know based off of the conversation that we want to create recipe cards for 5 major beverages that our coffee shop needs to carry.
Hmm.
In addition to the recipe card for that, we know we want the ingredient list and the proportions. We know that we want the instructions on how to assemble it. But maybe we also want to look forward to a spring special. So we could put that all
Hmm.
in a single prompt and say, create a list of 5 popular beverages in a coffee shop, include the recipe and in the ingredients and the special notes, and go ahead and suggest 2 promotional beverages that we can use in the spring. And you could put all of that into a single prompt, and you're kind of combining things. If you were to do that kind of uh, as part of the chain of thought prompting, we would here. So like I've got what are the drinks, and then we got the table. Then we could go and say, like, to add on to this, suggest 2 spring um, promotional beverages.
Hmm.
And through the course of the conversation, we're stacking another ask or another prompt onto it. Now, this one's pretty basic. This is basically um, it's not going to any kind of like advanced technique, but because we've already prompted it through a conversation, we kind of grounded it in the context of coffee drinks and recipe cards.
Hmm.
Look what
It's
it
got
did.
the right structure in its response. You're just
Exactly.
kind of like, oh, we should do this other thing too. That's the stacking the ask on.
Yeah. And
Okay.
you could combine this into like a single prompt
Hmm.
if you wanted to. So like we could say like so we'll go in, create a table of 5 espresso drinks with ingredients, recipe guide, instructions, and notes.
Hmm.
Also suggest 2 spring promotional drinks. So we're kind of putting all of this into a single prompt,
Yeah.
and we're kind of building along the way. Now we could be more specific with this, but you know, I don't want to get too incredibly complicated with this one. And sometimes, like, as this is like, as I'm typing something like this out, I may or may not get like what I'm looking for initially. So, like, I might have to iterate on it a couple of times. That's where like Copilot Notebook is really good because you can create
Hmm.
that giant prompt, something you want to try to reuse, and you can iterate through Copilot Notebook a bunch of different times and maybe get a more one prompt result out of
Yeah.
it versus like iterating through a
I've
conversation.
I've heard it called like a mega prompt, right? You're getting into the world of mega prompts, which can be good, but can also be dangerous because I feel like when you're trying to develop the one prompt to rule them all for the thing that you're trying to figure out, I feel like you're going to spend a lot of time just going in circles to develop that like amazing perfect prompt to give you exactly what you want. And it's like if you're not going to use that prompt over and over again, I personally feel like it would be better to just kind of like have a conversation with it instead of like trying to go back and make a little bit better and then go back and make a little bit better and then go back and make a little bit better. Just for you to be like, okay, it's perfect. I got my thing. I'm gonna take it and then never go back to this conversation again. You wasted a ton of time
Yeah.
like getting the perfect one shot prompt out, where you could have been like, yeah, that's good, but let's do this or let's do that. And you were conversational in it. You get to a better result with less like, I don't know, less just spinning your wheels. you know,
So I prefer the
it's a
conversational
pitfall.
approach. That is by far
Hmm.
my biggest tip and trick for prompting is conversational because I personally don't believe in the one shot or the one prompt to rule them all. Like I think that's um
It's like this white whale that I keep chasing, and
it's
I fall into
imaginary.
this pitfall
Yeah.
myself, and I think it's because I come from a world of, like, command prompts and coding where it's like, "I gotta get this right on the first try," and I'm from the world of, like, writing a script, and I was a terrible coder, and the way I write scripts takes forever because I'd, like, make a little tweak, and then I run it, and make a little tweak, and then I run it, and I just kind of, like I was always just trying to like perfect the thing. And my friend Lee Reed, he talks about in one of his videos recently, or on a podcast actually recently, about like good, perfect being the enemy of good or good enough. And I fall into that problem a lot where I'm trying to get the perfect prompt whenever what I really need is I need a good starter and then I
Mhm.
need to stack on top of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've
We're
got
having a little therapy today.
no, this is it, there's not a perfect prompt. That's the thing
Yeah.
though. Like you can spend a lot of time really dialing it in, but remember, it's an intern that's really really smart. And going back to what we said at the beginning, you can tell it the same thing in almost the same way, and the results are going to be a little bit different each and every time because a
Yeah.
large language model is essentially a predictive engine. It tries to predict the next word in the sequence based off of like what got it to like where it's at. And it does have some machine learning and some analytics and some Microsoft Graph and then the Copilot structure like on top of it, but it's going to be a little bit different each and every time. And something as simple as adding two spaces after punctuation versus a single space could change the output of that. Capitalizing a single letter, abbreviating a single word can change the output entirely based off of that. And that's why,
Hmm.
or those are a few of the reasons why I think that creating that one prompt to rule them all is the white whale, versus you spend a lot of time trying to get to that point versus let's just do this conversationally. And then there's another prompt technique that we'll talk about in a couple of minutes, where once you've done it conversationally, maybe you get it to help you to craft a reusable prompt,
Hmm.
based off of the requirement.
Yeah. Perfect. Comment here is perfect prompts can't exist where time dictates the results. That's my problem. Is like it's never going to be perfect. I'm just going to get worn out, and I'm
Yep.
just going to be
And
like done.
that's why I started conversational. I kept trying to do that perfect
Yeah.
prompt, and it's like, this isn't working. I was like, there has to be another way. And so I started digging into it. And that's when I
Hmm.
discovered kind of the conversational approach to it.
Yeah.
So we'll circle back to some more prompt stacking. We got a few more examples to kind of
Hmm.
go through. Next up, oops, I think we
Oh,
both
sorry, I went
moved
forward
forward.
already.
Next up, we've got soft prompts. So
Mhm.
this one also has a counterpart, hard prompts. Soft prompts, hard prompts. You're suggesting a tile or a style or a tone. You're giving it some, in this case, soft guidelines for the output. On the other side of that, there are strict guidelines that you can provide, and you can have it. It has to be to the letter. This is what I'm looking for. In
Mhm.
either case, soft prompts is good for generative, creative content, varied content. Think of our pervasive ways to introduce a new coffee blend to our regular customers. So we've had this one over here for quite a while. You know, this comes from Tortuga Island and it's dark roasted, but we want you to really check out this new blonde bean that we're getting from Siren Cove over here. We think you're really going to like it. Well, that's a big transition from dark roasted over to like a vanilla blonde bean in the coffee shop. So we need to think of a way to persuade people to get over there. Soft prompts do
Mhm.
a really good job of that. Now, to demonstrate that, I can pull this up on the screen.
Yeah, go ahead.
One of the places that this actually already happens in Copilot is in Outlook.
Yeah.
So when you're in Outlook and you're starting to draft a response, and let me just grab a sample of some text real quick to put that up on the screen. So give me 1 second. I need to go to soft prompts. There we go.
You're so prepared. This is that prompt library last month. If you want like what Andy's doing here, look at last month's, live stream, or actually we published it on our channel. So this is our plug. Subscribe to our channel because we published like using Loop as a prompt library. That's exactly what Andy's doing right here. He built a prompt library for this session.
All right, so we're going to take this in, and I'm going to go and draft a response, and I'm
Hmm.
just going to paste that in. Why write a welcoming messages for new employees that are going to be joining the coffee shop. Now, before I go and actually have Copilot run on that, I'm going to go down here in the lower left-hand corner for the generation options. See, there's tones here: direct, neutral, casual, formal, make it a poem, and then you've got the length, short, medium, and long. This is kind of an example that's out of the box of like a soft prompt. So we could say, we want this welcoming message to be casual. Now I could put that in the body of the prompt itself, but in this
Hmm.
case, that's something that's natively built in to Outlook. So like I don't have to do that for this particular message. I can just go down here to the parameters and set that. So I'm pointing that out to let you know that there are some things that are already built into Copilot that are going to apply to some of these techniques, and they're
Yeah.
going to start. Um, and you can kind of choose your own adventure along with that. Another place that you might see something similar is if you use the Copilot inside of Microsoft Edge. Depending on the version that you're working with, you might see the compose tab along the top, and that's going to allow you to compose a message. And
Yeah, it's in the personal one. If
yeah,
you like have a personal profile, there's compose. Not to fanboy too hard, but this is like one of my favorite things about how Microsoft is doing generative AI is they're putting an interface on top of some of these concepts so that like it's helping us ease into this like new world of like, oh, you might forget the tone, but the tone is just like a switcher right in the UI, right? So I feel like it's a little bit of like I feel like I'm kind of stepping into this world instead of just like, well, here's your empty text box. Good luck, you know?
exactly. And
Yeah.
the one of my favorite generative AI tools is actually Adobe Firefly. It was one of the first image generating tools. It actually gave you
Hmm.
a sidebar parameters that you could apply to have consistent output with images versus like
Yeah.
trying to craft the perfect prompt to get a consistent character each and every time. Adobe Firefly had that built in like early on, and I really like it. And I like it here that it's inside of Outlook, for instance. So I didn't have to say make a soft, persuasive um, message for this thing. I can just go, hey, make this casual, and then tell it what I
Yeah.
want,
You
and
didn't
then I
have
can
to
keep
put
it.
those kind of keywords in and have the right word to tell the AI to do it a certain way. Yeah. Now you will be doing those types of like adding in those details that are suggesting a style or suggesting a tone. You will be doing that more in like the traditional Copilot chat, right? Because it kind of doesn't really have those sliders and buttons for you. That's something to keep in mind as you've got that blank prompt window. The technique of soft prompting is kind of gently nudging the AI in the type of thing that you want without giving it an explicit example. That's where it's a little bit different from like the few shot or the one shot or things like that. Is like those ones you're getting a structure because of an example, so it's a little bit more hard. The soft prompt is like a little bit more like, I want you to have this style. I want you to think about it in this way.
Hmm.
It's softer, which is the name of the,
Yep.
the technique. Yeah.
We validated that because I went in here and I said I had coaching by Copilot run on this, and it's like this could be more professional. It's very enthusiastic and friendly, and that's what I wanted. Now it might be
Yeah.
overly enthusiastic and friendly, but I can adjust that. The reader sentiment, it's positive and it's warm, and then clarity,
Hmm.
it's vague about some of the things, and that's okay. So it's going to do what I want. I'll show you one more example of this that I think is really helpful. So I'm going to go back in. I'm going to just do a new Word document,
Okay.
and while that loads, let me go grab a sample. So I'm going to do I just want a press release. Create an informative yet concise press release about the coffee shop's recent sustainability initiatives, and we'll
Okay.
Copilot based off of that. And then I'm just going to say, make it fun and engaging in the voice of a pirate. So soft prompt, telling it the kind of the tone that I want, fun and engaging. And in this case, I'm also telling it, hey, assume a persona. So this one's always fun. Let's see what it decides to create today.
Hmm.
But as this loads, remember, you can go in the complete opposite direction, and you can go into a hard prompt and you can say, these are the guidelines that it has to follow. Uh, this is the style guide that we use. This is the tone that we use. This is the voice that we use. This is the assertiveness that we use. You can go completely in the opposite direction.
Hmm. Yeah, and your soft prompting technique, would it still be considered in your mind to be soft prompting if you had like the style guide in a document and you're basically like referencing it in Copilot chat to do like slash style guide? Would that be considered like you're kind of side loading the soft prompt elements?
To a certain extent, yeah. That one falls under the few shot technique, and if you're including the
If
tone
it
and the
has
voice
examples
in
in it.
there, that would fall underneath like prompt stacking and then soft prompting. So as John mentioned earlier, you're going to start blurring the lines. There's going to be overlap between the various techniques.
Mhm.
So this one, ahoy mateys, join us for a green adventure at the coffee shop. And just glancing through that, it's a pretty good starting point about drafting an informative yet concise press release. I'm not referencing any other content. We're just doing this straight prompting inside of here. But I think that's a pretty good outcome for soft prompting. So in this
Mhm.
case, we're looking at the tone and the way that the message might be delivered. Shiver me timbers, we're saving the planet.
I love like creative stuff like that. Like
It
it's a
was
really
trained on a
fun to
lot
watch
of
what it
dad
does.
jokes.
Yeah.
So I'll let that one finish up. Let's dive into the next one.
Okay. Yeah, the iterative refinement. Oh, sorry.
Do you want to
So,
grab this one?
yeah, so iterative refinement is basically, starting with an initial conversation or an initial prompt, and then basically using the response to kind of like naturally um, ask for it to kind of tweak and adjust what it came back with. So the example here is a perfect example of I'm going to share my screen where it's like, I'm going to open up Outlook. Outlook's another perfect place to do this type of example where you're saying like, let's draft. Oh, here we go. So if we do like draft with Copilot, I'm going to make this bigger. And I said like draft an email announcing a new store opening for, for our coffee shop, And I hit generate. This is another place where Outlook has kind of built it into the interface as well. So we're excited to announce the opening of our thing. This is great. But what I want to do is I want to add something to it. I want to refine it a little bit. And Microsoft kind of invites you to do that. It used to be that what you would do is you would like click on the actual prompt and have to add it. Recently, Microsoft added an anything you want to change box. So they're inviting you to iteratively refine it. So what you can say is, I want you to add an invitation to a tasting event that we're going to have. So I'm going to add that, and then it's going to rewrite it, incorporating that refinement into it. So this is the idea of iterative refinement, where it's like, yeah, that's good, but add this or change this little tweak. Another place where you kind of are doing iterative refinement is in Microsoft PowerPoint as well. You get a bunch of slides, and then you ask Copilot to like add 3 slides about this or add 3 slides about that. That's the idea of like, refining a little bit onto it. So you can see here, don't miss this opportunity. We want to invite you to a special tasting event, right, where you can enjoy a free cup of coffee. So I've refined it a little bit, or I've said like, I'll change this or change that as well. So that's a good example using like the email example. That's the where I use it the most. I think a portion of what I was doing at Innovation Realized with our Copilot and Stream example was a little bit of iterative refinement, where I was character limited in how what my prompts could be. So I was like saying, hey, okay, we've got this recording. Give me 10 key takeaways and an executive summary. And it comes back, it's kind of like, boilerplate, it's kind of stuffy, and it's just like giving you what you want. It's like, okay, now I want you to rewrite that summary, but I want you to be like, very positive, and I want you to pretend that you're, like an event organizer who's excited and wants to, pull out key themes, things like that. We'll put in the chat like persona pattern. This is one where you can be like, okay, that thing was a little bit too stale that I got back. So I want to kind of like tweak it a little bit to say, like pretend that you're this person, or pretend that, that your audience is like a bunch of sixth graders. Let's try again with that little tweak to it. That's the idea of iterative refinement, and trying to get to what you want, based off of the result. This is something that honestly I feel like you kind of back your way into as a new prompter, where you don't get exactly what you want, but you get conversational with it, and you start kind of like asking it to get to what you want, but you don't quite know what you want yet. You just want to like see where you can go. I think that's a back end way of getting into iterative refinement.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the iterative refinement is and then how I started working with some of the other techniques. Just working with the same prompt over and over, and making the small tweaks to it and seeing the outcome can be really, really time consuming. And I've done a lot of that on like with Midjourney and working with like images. And then when I got over here into ChatGPT and into Copilot, I kind of started going into the direction of the conversational approach, because I could guide the conversational approach a little bit better than I could iterate against a prompt over and over.
Yeah, I like this comment from Daryl. Not just because he complimented me earlier, is it's the shift from like instructor to director, of like, rather than like dictating commands, you're directing where you want it to go, but you're giving it the room to get there. Yeah, I think that's a great way to explain it, Daryl.
All right.
Okay, you want to move on to the next one?
Yep.
All right, let's get meta.
Meta prompting.
Yeah.
This one's really fun. So meta prompting is where you basically use the generative AI to kind of preload it through a conversation, through prompt stacking, through iterative prompting. And when you get to a certain point, you ask it to create a prompt that would get you back to those results a little bit faster than doing a conversation. I've used this a lot. I like this. It's really powerful, but you got to do the work to get to the prompt piece first.
Yeah.
I'll jump on the screen and demo this one. Daryl's going to love it. So coming out of my prompt library in Microsoft Loop, I've got a prompt that I want to use. Create a prompt that would help the store managers optimize the staff scheduling during peak hours. So let's head back to one of our previous conversations. And so earlier we were
I beat Daryl too, and he said loop.
So earlier we had the example of the opening and closing procedures. So I'm going to go back to that, and I'm going to combine this with a few shot technique. So let me just go and grab the previous checklist. So we've got our opening checklist, we've got our closing checklist, and then based off of that, create a prompt that's going to help the store managers to optimize staffing during peak hours. So we've given it a little bit of what we're doing. What are some of the things that are already there? Now infer the in between, and then kind of give us a prompt based off of that. Now, full disclosure, I get mixed results when I do this in Copilot. Like when I go to Copilot Chat, Worker Web, and I ask it to help create a prompt, a lot of times this is what I see, and this isn't necessarily a reusable prompt. So we're going to take this thing that it's got here, and let's just copy that out. And let's say like maybe I go into a new Word document, and I want to try to use that as like the next piece. So I'd go in and say, okay, well, let's use this, and then generate off of that.
Would you say, Andy, that it was usefully wrong, to quote Jared Spataro? It wasn't what you wanted, but you are using it to do something else. I put that in my tagline on LinkedIn. I'm usefully wrong.
That's a really good application of it. By the way, I found your doppelganger on LinkedIn the other day.
Oh, did you?
His name is John Moore, and he is also bearded and wears glasses like you.
It wasn't my dad, was it? Because he's also John Moore. He's the white bearded version of this.
No, this was a brown beard.
Okay.
All
There's a
right.
lot of John Moores out there, man.
So I'm just going to
Okay.
go back and like look at the beginning of this.
Hmm.
The prompt that it gave is based on our sales data and customer flow pattern. Identify the peak hours for our coffee shop. Create a staff schedule that ensures optimal coverage during these times, while also considering the following tasks. So it does have like a series of tasks and an outcome. It's not necessarily in the format that you may see it for some uh, other prompts, other prompt guides. But if we go back and we look at the document based off of what we know, this document represents staff schedule for a coffee shop, optimizing during the peak hours, takes into considerations the various tasks that need to be performed. The busiest hours are going to be from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. So just at the 10,000 foot view, it looks like it's doing what we asked. It looks like it's actually giving us a prompt to
Hmm.
optimize our scheduling during those peak hours, because it is identifying those peak hours and some of the things that might apply. The average customer transaction time is going to be 15 minutes. The average time required to clean and maintain the equipment is going to be 15 minutes. Make sure you have adequate staff. Here's a staff schedule that you might want to consider, and it's giving an
Hmm.
example based off of that. So in that case, because we gave it some requirements, it did output something that looks like a prompt, and then you can make that something that's reusable. One of my favorite examples, and this is like the biggest complaint that people have against Copilot and ChatGPT, is it sounds like generative AI. One of the big things that's come
Hmm.
out over the last like few weeks is that you can easily identify content from ChatGPT because it uses the word delve in it. Uh,
Mm.
delve and
Yeah.
tapestry, I think, are the two big words that are that pop up, and that's actually based off of the data that it was trained on. That actually comes out of some of the call centers in other countries where those two words are used frequently, whereas they might not be as used as frequently in the U.S. outside of Microsoft
Mhm.
Delve for people having oversharing incidents in their
Oh, no.
Microsoft Cloud environment. But one of the things that people say about this tool is that it sounds too chat gpt or too copilot like. It has certain terms and certain terminology that I
Yep.
wouldn't necessarily use. So in that case, what you can do is you can actually meta prompt. You can give it a sample of your text, a sample of something that you would write in your voice, and then tell it draft or create a prompt that captures this tone and this speaker's voice so that I can create reusable content in the future. So off to the
Yeah.
side over here, I'm going to go and grab something from my blog. Let me grab an older blog post. Just one second.
Okay. Yeah, so I was using this idea of meta prompting to prepare for the event that I just got back from in San Francisco, where we were trying to create like a prompt library of like what we were going to run against these session recordings, and to do that, I was using the session descriptions. So, like, I had a couple of generic prompts that are like, "Hey, give me key takeaways. Hey, rewrite it in this way. Put on a persona." That type of idea. But where I feel like got to like pretty good prompts was I was asking Copilot to help me write a prompt with this generic prompt. So I was doing one shot, right? I was giving it the generic prompt, but I was saying I want you to write a better prompt using this session description to refine it. So I would feed in like I did like slash the session description that was in a Word document. So I was using that feature of Copilot. I was doing a one shot because I gave it the generic example. And then I was ultimately doing a meta prompt because I was asking for a new prompt. I took that, I added it to the prompt library. So that was another one of those, like, you're kind of context switching between like different techniques within a task that you want to get done. That's one example as well. Okay, so you've got an old blog post up here.
Yep. So I got a little bit of context from an old blog post. I'm telling it, create a reusable prompt to capture the speaker's voice, tone, and style for creating new content for the speaker's blog. So what it should do is some text analysis, and then it should look for um, the tone, the warmth, the friendliness, whether like how they engage with their audience, whether they're casual or professional, conciseness and
Mhm.
clarity. This is really cool to kind of go through and just kind of analyze your writing style. I've done this on and off throughout the years. The first time that I had this done was by somebody that formerly worked at the CIA as a handwriting analyst. The results of
Nice.
that were really interesting. That was way back when I was in high school. And then over the years, like getting into generative AI, doing kind of the same thing. It's really interesting to kind of learn your writing style. So this one is telling me some of the clarity and the precision, the conciseness. But this is also something to call out. I asked it to create a prompt to make a reusable style around that, and
Mhm.
instead it decides to draft like a blog post for me. So
Yeah.
in this case, this is not necessarily giving me the output of what I want. So I might actually revisit that prompt and iterate against it, give it a few more parameters to fall between, and then maybe recreate it.
Would it give you a better thing if you were saying, like, "Give me a prompt for ChatGPT or a prompt for Copilot," like, if you were specific about it, you think? Like, maybe it didn't quite understand the request?
All right, so we'll just enter that in so we can use in Microsoft Copilot. And again, it's kind of giving me the same
Yeah.
format. It's giving me a blog post title, introduction. In this case, it's kind of approaching it from the let's generate some new content, kind of in the same template and style as before.
Mhm. I think
Uh,
it's one-shotting at you,
yeah.
right? I mean, it's a good-looking blog post for sure.
And it's
Um,
it's giving me some of the information that I want. Like
yeah.
here, it's telling me um formal yet fun. And this drives me crazy. Stop this, Microsoft. Just let me highlight the piece on the page that I want. So
Mhm.
it's giving me a little bit of that. But it's also pulling a lot of information back from the original article. So like once again,
Yeah.
might just go back and update that and say, here's a sample of my writing. All right. Make sure quote all of that. So hopefully prompting it with this is a sample of my writing can kind of give it a
Yeah.
little more context of what I'm
That's
looking.
another technique I've seen in Microsoft's documentation is to use quotation marks to your benefit by, like, wrapping things in quotation marks. You can really kind of, like, tell Copilot what to focus on.
And I'm going to stop it because it's kind of going down the same route again. So I'm going to iterate on that
Kinda
one
just
more time.
hallucinating. I
But
mean, and this is also a time where, like, you may you may find that if it's off the rails so much, you get a better result if you, change topics and
yeah,
kind
and
of,
just
like,
start
wipe its
over.
memory, which this was something that Daryl brought up that Will also answered is, like, "So does that mean that it, like, remembers your tone for the future?" And, Will pointed out, like, "Yeah, for that session," it's we're kind of playing with, like, what we can do to, like, load it into its short-term memory, um, and yeah, like Will said, like, you might have to remind it of the rules, you know? Um, yeah, where it's like, yeah, like a tail pattern. I've seen people like I think Ethan Mollick has talked about this before where it's like take your time or do it right. Like adding some little things onto the end of it can kind of like almost refocus it. I
I'm
think
going to
that's the
add
one I've seen a lot, is
think
like take your time, and it'll be
it
like really methodical about it.
through.
Think it through. Yeah, that's the other one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
think about it. Think about it step by step. Think it through.
Yeah.
And you see, it's kind of going down the same path. And this just shows that like the techniques can vary depending on where you use it. Complete contrast. I use this same exact style prompt in ChatGPT for text analysis, voice, and tone, and it does a really good job of that. Here,
That's a good
it's
point. You're going to get
trying to
different
write an
results
article.
in Copilot versus ChatGPT, even though they're both OpenAI, like GPT-3, GPT-4. They do different like techniques of like prompt transformation and trying to help you when it augments and helps with the prompt. Gemini is going to act a little bit different. Claude's going to act a little bit different.
So switching over to Copilot for work. And this time it gave me a paragraph, but it's not capturing the essence
It's
of what
still
I
just
want.
kind of content
Yeah.
itself. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think it was usefully wrong for the till the end there on that one. Morris says, but Copilot's the best, right? It's a little bit too. I think in this scenario, it's just a little bit too set in its ways, right? Okay, you want to move on to the next one? We got 4 more to cover here.
So we've covered this one a little bit already. Prompt
Yeah.
chaining. This is very similar to chain of thought prompting, very similar to iterative prompting. With prompt chaining, you're looking at related prompts, but you put them in a sequence in order to complete. You could do that conversationally, follow up one after another, or you could put them into a single prompt, and then you can say for this part, this is what I need you to do. For the next thing, this is what I need you to do.
Mhm.
For the next thing, this is what I need you to do. And that goes back to something that Will mentioned just a moment ago. And that's kind of like reminding it about the rules. He specifically mentioned something called the tail pattern. Prompt chaining is a really good example of that, because you can go through and say, I need to get the 5 popular coffee shop beverages, the ingredients list, and I
Mhm.
want the recipe for that. Iterate through it, and then down at the end, you're going to say, this is the format that I want it to come out in. Put it in a table format. Make sure that you use bullet points for the ingredients and that they're on a new line. So you're adding in that, in this case, the tail pattern, but it's the main technique is called prompt chaining, and it's good for multi-step operations. So we've kind of iterated through a couple of versions of that. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Especially the example that you had along your the conversational, like you knew where you were going, so that's kind of a little bit more like prompt chaining,
Mhm.
where you were like bringing the recipes and then you brought them together at the end into the table. I think that's one of those, you could be in a very gray area between like what you're doing.
I want to try one example
Yeah.
of this live in the demo, and I really am curious to see what the results are going to be. So we're going to go into PowerPoint, and PowerPoint takes a moment to load, and then we've all experienced that button along the top. All right, and let's go ahead and paste in the prompt. Create a slideshow showing sales trends, follow with a slide analyzing the impact of marketing efforts, end with a proposal slide for next year's marketing strategies.
Hmm.
We're going to let it work on that. I don't have much content around that, and so it's doesn't like that particular prompt. Let's just try to change the topic, and I'm going to try one more time on that. And I'm going to let that run, and I'm going to go and I want to see Word's output on the same thing. Yeah, so PowerPoint doesn't like that. Now, we told it in Word to create a slide. So notice it's slide 1, slide 2, slide 3. It's using headers inside of there for that. And let's just say marketing report. All right, so that exists in my OneDrive. I should be able to find that pretty quickly. There's the marketing report. Let's grab the path to that. All right, so I got the path to that, and then we're going to go back over here, and then let's actually say, well, let's create a presentation from a file. It's looking through. I don't see marketing report showing up there, unless I'm just missing it. So let's give it the path to that thing, and now let's work across the two copilots and see if it's going to be able to draft a presentation based off of the outline that we created in Word. And this is a fairly new file, so we'll see. And it looks like it's starting to create it. Now we asked for 3 slides. It looks like it's going to create 5. And it's about 50% of the way there. But while it continues to run on that, we'll just go back to it. And so the prompt that I entered in, that's not what I'm looking for. The prompt that I entered in for that, head back to loop, create a slideshow with annual sales, follow up with a slide analyzing the marketing efforts, and then end with a proposal slide. So we need annual sales trends, analyzing the marketing efforts, and then a proposal slide. So hopefully it'll actually create that. Annual sales trends, marketing efforts, and then proposal for next year. It added 3 entry slides, but it got the core of the content. So in that case, prompt chaining actually was successful. And now we've got a good starting point.
Yeah.
And then just going back to the conversational approach, you can do this in a single prompt. Sometimes you can go sequentially step by step and add to the thing over and over. And that can be helpful. But I do, as much as I like the conversational style, I do want to bring out one call out by Will, and that's it does forget things even in a conversation. It does get locked onto certain topics, and it just won't let it go. And so sometimes you have to start over on that.
Yeah. Okay. And you want to leave prompt chaining?
Yeah, we'll go to that one in just a second. I want to call out Daryl's comment here. Create a PowerPoint outline inside of Word and then feed it to Copilot. Do that all the time. Do initial research in Copilot chat, then move over into Word, start creating an outline, use Copilot to help me to format the outline to get it to the place that I want, then transition over into PowerPoint and start building a presentation based off of that outline. And then once you deliver all of that, if you do it like live, you can capture the transcript, and based off of the transcript and the 2 files, you can do synthesis and create a pretty good blog post out of all of that content and really minimize the amount of time that it takes to pull all that together.
Yeah, it's like you using the right tool for the right job, right? What it's best at, and with the formatting that you can do in Word, you can end up, with a better PowerPoint because of that. Because you're able to like format it, make things bold, make it H1 versus H2 versus H3, things like that. You're giving that structure that PowerPoint can understand a little bit better.
Yeah,
that's for sure a good technique. Okay, so contrastive prompting is another technique that we want to talk about. And this is the idea of, telling Copilot what you want, but also what you don't want, right? Or what something isn't. The example here is like describe both how to handle rush hour, like what's a good thing, what's bad, right? What does good look like? What does bad look like as well? So I've got on here that example of so my first one is the idea of like, all right, describe again a rush hour situation, like how to handle it and how not to handle it. Like, what are some of the pitfalls, right? It helps you kind of point out some of the things to avoid, especially when you're like developing strategy, right? It can tell you like how you can efficiently handle it, right? So it's the right answer, it's the good way of doing things. But if you want to fail, right, or what is destined to fail, it's giving me like the inefficient way to do the thing that I'm asking about. So that's the way to kind of like, you know, give me give me what it is and also what it isn't. Another thought that came to my mind on the side that I developed was the idea of like a marketing campaign. And another thing that you might be doing is like what's your mission, right? And sometimes the mission is like we're a small artisanal shop and we're going against big coffee, right? So like we want to contrast ourselves to something, right? So in my prompt I'm saying like, well, contrast the personalized touch of like an artisan, like small coffee shop versus like the just like batch them out type of thing of like a large corporate faceless coffee shop, right? So it goes into it, and it really, because I told it to like emphasize that difference, or like emphasize what we aren't and lean into that. It gives me a lot of like, the craft, and talks about highlighting this, the expertise that the baristas have, things like that. Some of them, it gets into really creative stuff too, like one way that you can stand out is like community involvement, right? Or like engaging people in like a warm, customized way, something like that. So it really, you can kind of like point your response in a direction of like, I want to go hard into this area by saying like, here's who we are, but also like here's who we aren't. And that can like really kind of help you get things that maybe you weren't even really looking for, right? Like I think I would have, if I hadn't done this, like emphasize the contrast, it would have given me more boilerplate type of stuff. But I feel like this is much more customized for somebody who like, they want to show themselves as like a diamond in the rough, type of experience. So those are kind of my ideas about contrastive prompting. Do you have any ideas or examples you want to share?
One thing that kind of the OpenAI handbook on prompt engineering says is that you should focus in on what you want, so not so much what you don't want. By including the things that you don't want in a prompt, sometimes it confuses the model, and so you end up getting those things inside of there because it kind of got queued up. Um, the other kind of take to the contrastive prompting is you're kind of sometimes looking at it from an oppositional point of view. Is a way that you can have it look at like a process or look at something without referencing necessarily like the what not, or including what not to do inside of the prompt itself. So you can say like, imagine you're a frustrated customer and these are the 5 complaints. From the customer's point of view, help us to figure out how we can streamline our process to make the wait in line less long. So taking that oppositional point of view, contrastive point of view, and prompting that way can be helpful.
Yeah. I mean, that's a little bit of what I did with that Excel spreadsheet where I was like, hey, give me top 10 or give me 10 random complaints. Like you could almost do that in a way of like focusing on the negative
Hmm.
for a little bit of time to like look at like, okay, what are the things we should avoid? Or not to focus on negative or contrasting or the opposite of what you want. Another thing you might do in the real world is like, hey, uh, generate me an FAQ about this new thing. And like you don't know really what people are going to struggle with, but the AI can maybe help you. It can help like surface some things that you don't realize are going to be a struggle, and you can kind of precede like an FAQ or something like that for a product that you're releasing. Yeah, Daryl has a good comment here about like it's like saying like don't trip over that toy, you know. You get what's it called, like a target focus or something like that, where it's like, by looking at the guardrail you're more likely to hit it
Yeah.
because you focus on it. Yeah, so it can be dangerous. It could be a pitfall for sure. Um, Moving on to the next one. This one I think is really pretty self-explanatory, to be honest.
Hmm.
It's the idea of hybrid prompting. We talked multiple times about this, of like explaining like the idea of like switching techniques in your session. I demonstrated that earlier with the idea of like, I took a zero shot. Give me a generic response to a customer complaint, and then I took that and I used it as my one shot to like iterate through 10 customer complaints. So the idea of like developing something and then saying like, okay, apply it to this. That's going from zero shot to one shot. Andy, you had a couple times also where you switched techniques like
Hmm.
in mid conversation, right? And
Yeah.
that's the idea of hybrid prompting.
Yep. Yeah. So it's a full exploration of the chain of thought, the conversation that you're actually having. And in many
Mhm.
cases, like there might be a part of the prompt, to use the example here, how to explain a new coffee flavor, and then use examples of past recipes. Within that prompt, you're combining different techniques. So in this one, zero shot and a few
Mhm.
shot, you're mixing them together. You're using the zero shot to set the context of what you want, and then you're using the few shot as the examples from previous successful introductions. So within the same prompt, you're blending a couple of different techniques. So in this case, a zero shot and a few shot works pretty well. Prompt chaining: do this first. It's going to be a zero shot. Next, do this. Maybe it's another zero shot, and then
Mhm.
finally do this, and it's going to be a few shot. In that case, you're mixing zero shots, few shots, and you're using prompt chaining, and you're doing it within the same prompt. Let's see, hybrid
Mhm.
prompting. We can do an example of that. I got a whole workbook full of
Yeah.
different examples that we might be able to pull.
Crazy
Um,
prompt library.
so
So
draft.
one thing I've learned from this session for the past 2 hours is if I'm ever gonna do a promptathon, I'm gonna be on Andy's team because he is crushing it over here. Like, oh my gosh, dude.
What I need is a better notebook from all the prompts that I've done in ChatGPT over the last year and a half, so that I can organize all of that and extract all the different prompts that I use. But that's a whole lot of work. It's easier in Copilot. All right,
Mhm.
let's paste in this prompt. So draft an email inviting feedback on new store policies. This is a zero shot. Include examples of effective feedback from the past, and then request specific suggestions. Contrastive prompting. So that's going to blend three different techniques.
Mhm.
And as much time as it saves, there is a little bit of time as you have to wait while it thinks and gathers all that information and brings it back.
Mhm.
So just looking at this, like it is giving me an email format, which is what we wanted. New store policies change can be challenging. So new store policies include some examples. Here are a few things that we've done in the past to help
Mhm.
teammates. So it actually gave us that information, and then request specific suggestions. We'd appreciate feedback. Feel free to share. Best regards. I'd say it got most of what we wanted in that one hybrid prompt, and that one went pretty well.
Nice.
So I've got a whole bunch of those. I might share a couple of additional hybrid prompt techniques uh, on some of our various chats out there. I'm curious to see what you think of hybrid prompt techniques, and if you have a favorite that you like to use, reply in the chat. Would love to hear that. And I'm constantly iterating against these things and trying new ones,
Mhm.
and seeing like what's going to stick and what's going to work.
I feel like hybrid prompting is kind of something that you like do. You kind of like find yourself doing it by happenstance, right? It's like I don't realize that I'm doing it, and I'm kind of just switching like for what works or what pops in my mind at that moment. I don't know. I don't really think of things in like I'm setting out to do hybrid prompting right
And
now.
when you
It just
craft
kind
it,
of
you're not going
happens.
to explicitly
Yeah.
put 0 shot and few shot in parentheses. It's going to be implied. You're going to say,
Yeah.
explain how to introduce a new coffee flavor and then use past examples. There's a variation of that. Let me come back on the screen for just a second.
Sure.
So, like, let's say we go to like Copilot chat. Like, look at the prompts up here at the top. So,
Hmm.
write an email to my team about our top priorities for next quarter from file. That's actually a hybrid prompt. You're telling it you want to write an email about the top priorities, but you're going to go and reference information from another file. So in that case, it might be a one shot that you're working with as you're telling it to a 0 shot to draft an email to your team. That's actually a hybrid version of that. What's the latest from this person, organized by emails, chats, and then files? That when you're providing context in the output that you want, you're referencing a file as an example, a
Hmm.
one shot, or in this case, a few shot, because it's going to
I
pull emails,
noticed
chats, and files.
I've noticed that that prompt has gotten better over time, actually. When
Yeah.
when we were in, like, the EAP program, that sample prompt in the top corner was just, "What's the latest from name?" And then over the past couple months, they've, like, done organized by this, that, and the other, because they found, I think, that, like, when I said, "What's the latest with?" It might give me, like, just a paragraph, but if I did organized by this, that, and the other, it put them into sections, and it was like better to read, and I liked it. I liked the output better. It was more attractive. So like even Microsoft is kind of like tweaking some of these, like example prompts in Copilot Lab to as they find like that they give better results.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm pulling up a prompt that's closely related to that. This is actually
Hmm.
from our chat the yesterday. Um
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
this is kind of a hybrid prompt.
Which one
Provide
is
an
this?
overview of all the articles published for publication this week. List each article, its title, author, scheduled publish date, and include a status update on that. This one's kind of fun because the results that you get back, depending on the organization that you're in and your information security and oversharing, this one might return some surprising results within Copilot for Microsoft 365.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see what comes up on this because we're in a sandbox where like MVPs are like doing crazy weird stuff, but like not necessarily working together on it. So
Paul Robichaud has been busy.
oh my gosh. You know what you're doing, Andy, is you're like exposing like what these guys are gonna post on their blogs for the next like 6 months.
Thankfully, there's just some dates in the past, but
Yeah.
in this case, like this one, it's combining a couple of techniques. It is calling, referencing material that we have inside of there. It's
Mhm.
including like a status update on that. Adding some. Is it draft and review ready to publish, helping us to like map out a content schedule. That was kind of a hybrid technique. I just think that one's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
All right.
Yeah, I like that prompt. You can find some cool stuff that way. So
And then
oh, sorry.
the last one, oh, you take it. You drive
Sorry, we keep
it.
stepping on each other.
There it
Uh,
is.
yeah, go ahead, man.
Contextual prompting, just providing a sense of background for deeper understanding. So in the example here, this is given the trend toward plant-based diets, suggest new menu items that can increase morning traffic. You're guiding it in the direction to subtly give it the output or the outcome that you want. We've done a couple of variations of that. Chain of thought prompting is a good way to do that. Iterative prompting is a good way to do that. Soft prompting is a good way to do that. You could even combine it, but you're guiding it in a direction that provides scope and grounding it down into what you need. Referencing a file and then giving it maybe a couple of bullet points and saying, take this and summarize it as an executive summary. It would be, I think, a good example of contextual prompting.
That was kind of what I was doing in that example I talked about in San Francisco, where I was like saying, okay, I've got my prompt, like I need, bullet points from a session for a conference, but then I added the context of here's the session description so that it tuned toward the theme of what that session was, so that it wasn't just out of the box generic, the same thing for every single session. It looked at, well, what is this session about, so that I could, create a prompt that works for that session really well. And sometimes the context of what you're asking for, that little piece of context, it may be something that's like not directly related or seemingly relevant to what you're asking for, but the context can kind of turn it in a direction. Like in here, menu items for a coffee shop. Coffee shops, like it might, if you didn't have that context, it would just like offer like coffee specific drinks and stuff like that. But since we're talking about plant-based diets, whenever I ran the prompt, it mentioned like avocado toast, or like instead of these types of muffins, have like these plant-based options and stuff like that. So it's like, if something, it's good in ideation phases. If something is trending in your industry, then add that context of that trend, and then you're a little bit more in line with hopefully being successful with what you're ideating, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's spot on. While you were stepping through that version of it, I went ahead and drafted a version of it, just using
Mhm.
Copilot Chat for Microsoft 365. In this case, we're doing an email campaign. We're targeting former customers using insights from their previous visits and their purchase history. In order for it to do that, it would actually need to have some reference material for previous preferences and reference history. That might be one where you direct Copilot to a specific file, for
Mhm.
instance. But from there, we've set the context of what we're looking for, and an effective email campaign. It is going to pull in some of the training data for content that's been publicly available on that, and it's going to work that into its response and then start generating um,
Yeah.
output on that. But this one's useful because you're scoping it, you're grounding it down to that context, that topic, and it can be really eye-opening, the results. I might not have known some of the best practices for an email campaign targeting former customers. I might not have had knowledge of that. I'll give you one example of that, that it was really helpful for me. Uh, there's an Excel demo that I do, and it deals with an inventory list, and I needed help with putting like a formula into there. So I actually went to Copilot Chat and was like, here's a sample of my data. I need to create a new column inside of this to uh, set up a reorder date based off of what we have in stock and the quantity that we need to reorder. It
Mhm.
pointed out that you should actually do a formula based off of how many items are you using per day, so we can estimate when you're going to hit the reorder inventory level. And it created a formula based off of that. But it was because I gave it the context of the data that I was in, and I gave it the ask. It went ahead and pointed out that thing that I didn't know that I needed to factor in, was like, how many items am I using per day? That's going to give you the best estimate of when you need to go ahead and start that reorder.
Yeah.
So I think we've stepped through all the
Yeah.
different techniques that we have. I've got a loop workspace going with examples of each one of these, and just kind of continuing to iterate against them and try
Mhm.
to work with them. I would be really interested in our friends in the community, um, you sharing some examples of the different techniques that we talked about here today. what's your favorite technique? Let us know on YouTube. Let us know on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
We're interested to see what's your favorite, what's worked well for you, and to share some of those favorites with others. I know uh, John and I text back and forth a little bit and send some different super prompts and some prompt techniques. We've shared some chats back and forth as well, but I would be really interested to see what the community says and what some of your favorites are. So let us know.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Well, that is certainly a deep dive. Everybody should have known that there was no way we were going to cover 15 techniques in 2 hours. So we went a little bit over. I appreciate you all sticking around though to talk through some of these concepts. As you can see, like this is definitely it's still a developing and kind of emerging field, this idea of prompt engineering. I bet this time next year there'll be, several others, and what we may see is that like some of these techniques like combine and become like, like the gray area is too blurred between the two, and it's like prompt chaining and prompt stacking kind of becomes like one concept in the form in the field of prompt engineering. um and as like innovation happens with these LMs or these parties like Microsoft that are using LLMs, but they're building like interfaces on the front of it, they're kind of introducing like new ways to use them as well that like are kind of getting names and they become a prompt engineering, discipline. So it's definitely interesting and it changes all the time. There's a lot of thought pieces out there about it that, I like consuming. Um, but I really appreciate you guys's, contributions and chats. There was a lot of good stuff in there, really good insights about trying to find the perfect prompt or things like that. So I think it was really good interaction, and I learned a lot from you guys too.
Yeah, this one was a lot of fun. We had fun putting it together, but this was a lot of fun to
Yeah.
deliver. But I think with that, we are promptly going to wrap it up. We
Yeah.
will be back in May. We got planning started. If there's something you want to hear, something you want to see, let us know. But with that, have a great weekend, and we will see you all in the next 365 deep dive. Bye, everybody.
Thanks everybody. Bye.